The Wreck of the Iron Crown and a Letter Left Behind. This painting is Winslow Homer's Wreck of the Iron Crown. If you look closely, you can see the man left behind on the deck waving to the lifeboat, Charles Dibdin. The R&L lifeboat launched from the haven under enormous strain and danger and rescued 18 people in total. Where better to start this story of a most difficult but entirely successful rescue than the brigade's official history, TVLB 1864 to 1994, a chronicle 130 years of the Tyne Volunteer Life Brigade. Quote, just past midnight on the 21st of October 1880, the alarm was raised that a vessel was in distress on the north side of the Tyne. The ship, the Iron Crown, was reported to have struck the North Pier and then drifted onto the Black Middens. While the lifeboat crew struggled for over an hour to launch in the heavy seas, the volunteers fired lines from the pier to the Iron Crown, and having freed them from initial entanglement, began hauling back the crew in the breeches buoy in rapid succession. The volunteers had removed 5 people when the lifeboat finally got alongside and took the remaining people to safety. End quote. The ship's anchor held through the night, but there was still a man left on board. He had been believed to be dead. From the official report, quote, towards morning it was found that one man was missing, and at daylight he was seen on her deck. Fortunately, she was a very strong ship and her cable chain held, she only bumping at her stern on the rocks. As the tide rose and the sea became stronger and the chain cable could be heard link by link passing over the windlass, and it was clear that it must soon break from the great strain. As the man alone could do nothing with the rocket lines, it was decided to launch the lifeboat and bring him off. This was done about 11 o'clock a.m. About 20 minutes after he was landed, her chain cable broke, and in a minute or two she was broadside onto the rocks, every wave making a complete breach over her. During the night she went all to pieces. End quote. In this photograph by Orty, the famous Tynemouth photographer Orty, you can see the ship stuck on the Sparhawk rocks 20 yards beyond Rogerson's jetty on the haven. The last of the 5 brought ashore by Breeches Buoy handed over a letter written by the captain, stating that he wished his wife to be rescued next. With it implied that extra care should be taken with her, but no further rescues were required using the rocket apparatus, as the lifeboat had arrived at 2:30 a.m. and was ready to receive the remainder of the crew. The brigade still have the letter, and it's shown in this image. This painting here is by the coastal painter from the Colourcoat School, Robert Jobling. The Iron Crown was a massive 995-ton barque built at Palmer's Yard in Jarrow. She had been en route from Hamburg to the Tyne in ballast. She was one of the strongest vessels yet built on the Tyne, but broke up within hours of being driven onto battery rocks. The broken parts of her iron hull were strewn across the area, making the place resemble a scrapyard at low tide. There were around 90 brigade members in attendance before the guns on the Spanish battery sounded. They were joined on the pier by a gathering of onlookers. 2 rockets were fired from the pier to the vessel as waves crashed over the brigademen and the crowd, who cheered as each crew member was landed. A number of rockets were also fired skywards from the vessel to shed light on her situation. Quote, articles from the Shields Gazette, 22nd of October 1881. The gales. Yesterday's storm in the North Sea. The aftermath of the wreck of the Iron Crown. Between 12 and 1 o'clock, terrible seas were playing havoc with the barque Iron Crown. The sound of her ragged sails flapping in the wind resembled a volley of musketry. Her going to pieces in a very short time was imminent. Shortly before 2 o'clock, her masts fell, with a dreadful sound, accompanied by a brilliant illumination amidships produced by friction. She broke into pieces and sank. Nothing was to be seen of her afterwards, beyond portions of her stem and her stern heaving like black shadows on the water, alternately obliterated by the lashing sea. Mr. Shallcross, owner of the vessel, was down looking at her at 11 o'clock. He felt confident that she would remain intact. At about 3 o'clock, lights, or fancied lights, were seen on the horizon, but a murky haze in the atmosphere made indiscernible their bearing. The breakers, white as the driven snow, rolling into the harbour and on the Black Middens was a fine spectacle. About 4 o'clock, the wind freshened into a succession of violent squalls. A light at this time was seen a little to the south of the North Pier, but it was thought that the vessel, whatever she might be, was tacking out till daylight. The scene inside the brigade house, well on in the morning, was a striking contrast to the preceding night, when all was activity and bravery shown in the saving of life. Last night, however, stalwart fellows were soundly sleeping, glad of an opportunity to refresh the exhausted energies produced by long watching and hard work. At daybreak, the sea was still very tempestuous, and doing much to remove all traces of the ill-fated Iron Crown. The wind was blowing steadily from about the old quarter. Incidents at the wreck of the Iron Crown. The captain of the Iron Crown seems to have exhibited remarkable coolness in the midst of peril on Friday night. It appears that when one of the crew was being hauled ashore by the rocket apparatus, the vessel heeled over and slackened the hawser, the consequence being that he was hauled through the breakers head over heels. On being landed, he, in a gasping state, lay back and pointing to his necktie, exclaimed, "Captain's letter!" Willing hands at once loosened the scarf and found a note from the captain, asking if it would be safe to send his wife ashore with the lifeline. Again, while the crew were being taken aboard the lifeboat, another hand, in lowering himself down the rope, fell overboard right between the lifeboat and the ship, and narrowly escaped being jammed or drowned. The coxswain of the lifeboat grasped the collar from behind and dragged him into the lifeboat. He did not feel the effects much, for he jumped ashore from the lifeboat with surprising agility. The Iron Crown. Later details. A quantity of wreckage of the Iron Crown is washing ashore at the Black Middens. Pieces of beef, some clothing and wood are mixing with the rocks and seaweed. A considerable number of men, women and children were industriously searching for treasure trove. End quote. Thank you to John Wright of the TVLB and Steve Elwood at Tyne Snapper for their help in curating this content. The Tynemouth Volunteer Life Brigade needs support in order to continue their vital work keeping people safe on our shorelines. Please consider a donation to them.